Good evening, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming this evening, and for those of you viewing, welcome. My name is Cynthia Guazda. I'm the librarian at Hageman Library in East Haven, and I'm excited to introduce the Stonewall Speakers, who will help us celebrate Pride Month this evening. And they're going to talk about the history of the LGBTQ QI plus movement. They are Connecticut Stonewall, they're a program of the Connecticut Stonewall Foundation, Incorporated. They're an all-volunteer speakers bureau comprised of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, pansexual, queer people, and their allies. The speakers give their hearts, their time, and travel expenses to help eliminate hate and promote understanding. The panel discussion tonight will include personal stories and the history of the movement, and also there'll be a Q&A session at the end. So welcome, and I'm excited to introduce Lynn from the Stonewall Speakers, and she'll be speaking next.
Oh, I like the way you stood right out in the middle here. Look at that, I love it. Sorry, I'm blocking our speakers though. Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm president of the Stonewall Speakers, and thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Cynthia. And today we have 3 speakers. I'm going to introduce the Stonewall Speakers to give you a little bit of background on us, how we got started, and how we got our name. And then I'll introduce each of our speakers. They'll each take about 10 minutes to tell you their personal story. And so you get that background, and then after we tell our stories, we'll open it up to questions. We have some people in the audience here, and we'll always ask questions of you, but we hope we can have a nice discussion. So the Stonewall Speakers were started in 1988. It got started as a result of a horrendous murder. It happened in Hartford, Connecticut. There was a gay man named Richard Ryle. He was a vice president at Aetna Insurance Company, well educated. I believe he went to Northeastern. He was an executive there, and he was at a gay bar in Hartford, and 2 youth, 16 and 17 years old, met him there, followed him home to his apartment in Wethersfield or condo, and proceeded to beat him up. Turns out they had been gay bashing, beating up gay men for months before this. They were even arrested at one point. After they beat him up, they realized that he could identify them, so they went back, dragged him out to the front lawn, and beat him to death with a log. The newspaper boy found him the next morning. So during the trial, the judge made the observation that not only was Richard Ryle a victim, but these 2 boys got sentenced to 30 and 40 years in prison. And so their lives were ruined. During the trial, the gay community in Hartford came out. They were at the trial every day, and they were determined to make a change. So there was a group called Anti-Violence Project, and they decided to start a speakers bureau. So they decided that if they could go into the high schools with a panel of LGBT speakers like we're doing today, that would help people get to know LGBT folks, help allay their fears, and it was really unreasoned fear that these boys had. So we've been speaking in high schools. We're now speaking in middle schools, colleges, businesses since 1988. Originally we were called Speak Out, but we changed our name a few years later to the Stonewall Speakers. And that was in tribute to the Stonewall Rebellion that I'll say a few words about. In June of 1969, in Greenwich Village, there's a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn. And in New York City in the 60s, it was illegal for gay men to congregate in a bar, to be even served in a bar. So there were only a few bars that they could go to. They were usually run by the mafia. It was kind of under the table. And usually the police would come in, maybe raid the bar, maybe arrest 1 or 2 people. If you got arrested, your name got published in the paper, you usually lost your job, you could lose your family over this. So it was not a good situation, and it went on like that in the 60s until this evening in June 29th, I want to say, of 1969. During the raid, as some of the patrons were being led out into a paddy wagon, it turned out that some of the transvestites started to fight back. They swung their purse at the police and said, objected, I don't want to go with you. And that started a riot. It ended up being a 3-day riot. The bar got surrounded by patrons who all came from everywhere in the city to surround the bar. And it took them 3 days to quell this rebellion. And this we look back on as the start of the gay liberation movement, because the following year there was the first New York City Pride March. And so it kind of changed the attitudes of a lot of the gay folks who were kind of protesting silently and being well behaved in front of the White House, marching in signs with suits, to now they were being kind of militant, more like the spirit of the civil rights or the anti-war movement. And so they wanted to be proud and out. So that's why we took our name. I think our speaking order, I said maybe Audrey would go first, then Dave, then Gabby. We're sitting in the right order. Go ahead, Audrey.
Good evening, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Audrey Conrad, and I am transgender. And in my opinion, transgender is a term which is kind of an umbrella over anyone who is non-conforming. Doesn't matter if it's male or female bodied people, but if you're non-conforming, in my opinion, you're transgender. My opinion is not shared by everyone. There are some people in the transgender community who don't feel that drag queens are transgender. Oh no, they're gay. Well, excuse me, there are a lot of drag queens who do transition from a male body to a female body, and so I have a difficult time eliminating them from the transgender umbrella. I feel the transgender umbrella really should be pretty inclusive and include anybody who feels like they want to be under there. But of course, if they don't want to be under there, they can go find their own umbrella, and that's fine. Anyway, my story. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and my parents fought. They didn't fight, physically, but my father threw things, and it was a bad situation. And I learned very, very early on that I needed to get away from these crazies. So I was a little kid, I could not get away from those crazies. So I created a fantasy world in my own mind where I was in charge, where I could do whatever I wanted. And over the years, and I don't really know how, but over the years, I began thinking about dressing differently. If you look at any photograph of me when I was a little kid, always wearing a costume of some sort. So I had a proclivity, shall we say, for changing my appearance. Over the years, my imaginary mode of dress became women's clothes. And I would wait very expectantly for the Sears and Roebuck catalog to come, because you went through the Sears catalog, there's all kinds of wonderful clothes in there, and I would look at that and I would imagine myself dressed. Well, fast forward a couple of years, my parents got divorced, and my mother could not make a living in a small town in Indiana. So by that time I had 3 siblings, and she gathered us all up in a 49 Ford station wagon, Woody station wagon I might add, and we moved to Chicago. And once we're in Chicago, all of a sudden, she was working single mother, and working a lot to support the kids, all of us kids, and afford an apartment in Chicago, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of a sudden, when I was 11, I became responsible for my siblings. I had to make sure that they got to school in the morning, make sure that they got home from school in the afternoon, and made dinner every night, so that when my mother walked through the door, there was food for all of us to have as a family. I found that just fantasizing wasn't going to do it. And one day, I got my siblings to school, turned around, went back home, and started going through my mother's clothes and began dressing in her clothes. And I haven't stopped yet. These aren't my mother's. I outgrew all of her things a long time ago, although I still have some of her sweaters and capes and things that are not sized. Also some of her jewelry. But anyway, so I started dressing, and I dressed rather surreptitiously. I did not tell my mommy. And even though I didn't tell her, mothers know everything. And she figured out, but it was one of those things that you just didn't talk about. It was a proverbial elephant in the room. You didn't talk about, me wearing her clothes or anything like that. We didn't talk about it. And so, over the years, I ended up coming out to my mother, my father, my siblings, so they knew, my close friends knew, because I was never that secretive with my friends. I mean, we talked about everything, and that was just, part of me. And my close friends accepted that was part of me. So I went to college, graduated, taught in the city of Chicago public schools for 5 years because that was the deal. In Chicago at that time, they were very short of teachers, and if you promised to teach in the city of Chicago public schools for 5 years, you got a free education, which I did, and I did teach in public schools for 5 years, but as soon as I was done teaching in the city of Chicago public schools, I had had enough of teaching, and so I bailed out and started doing other things. The main other thing that I've done in my life is work on locomotives, steam locomotives. And so from about 1973 until I retired a couple of years ago, that's the way I made my living. I moved to Connecticut to work at the Essex steam train. And I was not out at the Essex steam train. A couple of the guys who I knew well, they knew, but basically I was not there, as no one knew about Audrey. Another one of my activities has been art. I go to a lot of art galleries, art shows. I'm not much of an artist. I do some steel sculpturing, but mostly I go places, museums, galleries, etc. And I've been very active with the Real Art Ways, which is an arts organization in Hartford. And we opened a new gallery at Real Art Ways, and it was a big celebration. And so I went there. I had a new outfit that I wore, and I was having a good time chatting with people. And a fellow who I knew from the area, Michael Price, who was the executive director of the Goodspeed Opera House. He was there, and so I was chatting with Michael, and a lady walked up, introduced herself as Pat Saramet from the Hartford Courant, and we all started talking, and eventually Pat turned to me and says, "So, Audrey, what do you do for a living?" And I said, "Oh, I work in the tourist industry." And my friend Michael pipes up and says, "Oh, don't take that for an answer. You gotta find out what this girl does. You'll never believe it." So they both started working on me, and eventually, instead of going to get another glass of wine, I told Pat where I worked. Well, what I didn't know was that Pat's column, it's called Business Beat. Pat's column was nothing more than snips of conversation that she picked up at various gatherings, corporate meetings, gallery openings, any place that she showed up. She'd wander around and find people, interesting people to talk to. And I didn't realize that at the time, but a couple of days later, I found out because I was at work, and one of the fellows that I work with walked up. He says, "So, do you know Audrey Conrad?" And I said, "Yes, I do know Audrey. How do you know Audrey?" He says, "Oh, saw her name in the newspaper. She says she works here. Your job, in fact." So I said, "Well, I better go get the newspaper." And I did. And there I was. Pat had said, she said something like, "It isn't every day that you meet someone at a party who's been working on the railroad all the livelong day." But there she was, Audrey Conrad, Chief Mechanical Officer of the Valley Railroad, with an interesting take on her job. And I had told Pat that I felt my job was akin to being a zookeeper for dinosaurs. And so, it was a cute quote, and I called up one of my friends, and I told her, I said, I just got outed, and we talked about it, and after chatting with her for a little while, it flashed to me, not going to get this cat back in the bag. This is it. So I immediately called up the president of our company, and it was a good thing too, because when he got to his desk in the morning, there on his desk was the Hartford Courant, opened up with my paragraphs circled, and there was a board of directors meeting about Audrey, and I didn't get fired. I ended up retiring from that place just a few years ago, and I still work there. I work there, when they need me, and during the North Pole Express season, I work quite a lot. So I'm still active in the arts, and still active in with the Valley Railroad Company, which does business as the Essex Steam Train and Riverboat, and I just kind of roll along. And I should back up just a little bit. After I moved to Connecticut, I joined a support group, a group called the Connecticut Outreach Society, and it's a group which is mostly transgender and transsexuals, and it meets once a month in Hartford, and they're still going after all these years. I'm no longer active in the group, but joining that group helped me quite a lot because I wasn't too experienced in going out in public, and one of the things the group did is they'd have banquets, and we'd have dinners and go places, go to the movies, this, that, and the other thing. So I became, more comfortable with myself than I was previously. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Ask anything. I've never been asked a question I couldn't answer.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you.
Next, Dave. No, Dave, you're up. You can sit. You don't have to feel like you have to stand, but whatever you would like.
Okay, I'll stand up here so if I fall over.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Dave Knapp, and so I'm 95 years old, and still doing pretty well. I do have cancer, which is dragging me down a little bit. Affects my walking, and I'm taking 10 dozen pills a day, but anyway, I'm still enjoying life. So I've had quite an unusual life, one that I never dreamed of, believe me. I grew up in 1926, so I grew up during the Depression, and fortunately, it did not affect my family. My father had a very good job at Johnson & Johnson there, and actually he was a high school dropout, and he ended up as vice president of the J&J International Company. So sort of a Horatio Alger story of, poverty and to a pretty good job. So anyway, and say we weren't affected much. In fact, we had a summer place at a mountain lake up in North Jersey, where we went all summer and went swimming and canoeing and sailing, and there was also a dude ranch there. And so I had my own horse, Western Cow Pony, which I loved, and we used to go to Far Hills and Bedminster, where all the Kennedys and the horse people lived, and they were still having the polo games, World Championship at Far Hills on Sunday afternoon, and these families would come down in their horse and wagon. They had cars, of course, but they wanted to show off with their horse and carriage coming down there. I can still remember that. And so anyway, that was interesting. So then the war came, and of course that affected everything dramatically. We couldn't go to our summer place, and we only had enough gas for Dad to go back and forth to work. And so I wasn't in the war as a fighter, but I was very, very aware of what was going on. And in the New Brunswick Daily News, every day it said killed in action. And every day you read that, killed in action, and you knew some of those that were killed in action. So it was, and Dad was an air raid warden and so forth. So we had to dig up our lawn and garden and plant fruit and vegetables, or vegetables anyway. And so you couldn't go everywhere. Fortunately, I had a Columbia bicycle, and we lived about 3 miles outside of town, and you went everywhere on that bicycle. Boy Scouts, church, Rutgers, whatever event you went to, and you went on your bike or you hitchhiked, and everybody would pick you up, everybody. And anybody that drove picked you up just automatically. The idea that anybody would do anything bad just never existed. You never even thought of it. So anyway, I went to Holland Park High School, which was 500 kids, a smaller version of Guilford High School, really, because a lot of the town executives, Rutgers University people lived there. So it was a really nice, very supportive town, and very supportive high school, even though it was only 500 kids. But anyway, I made my Eagle Scout my junior year, and I worked at my junior year, which is 1944. The Scout executive called me and said, would you be our waterfront director? Waterfront director at 17. I was the oldest counselor in camp, because all the men were either in the war, or if they were home, they were working 7 days a night and nights a week. They weren't available. So anyway, it was one of the best jobs I ever had. They sent me to a national camp, aquatic camp, and I was good at swimming, canoeing, sailing, like that. But at the camp, they taught you how to teach it. Very different from just being able to do it. And it was the best job I ever did. I got paid $0 for the whole summer, living in a tent and working 7 days a week. But I loved it. I decided I wanted to be a teacher. So anyway, I ended up graduating from Highland Park High School, and I just wanted to go to a good college. In those days, if you couldn't get into any place else, you went to Rutgers. And it really was pretty, I mean, there were certain departments that were good, but overall, it was pretty low class at that time. So a professor from Rutgers, the little three, Ivy League of Williams, Amherst, and Wesleyan sort of appealed to me. I'd never been to New England. I mean, it was like a new country. And I loved winter and skiing and snow, and I thought of John Whittier, you know, the snowbound. And so he said, I would recommend Wesleyan, because during the war, they just had courses from the Army and Navy. They were down to 100 students. They almost collapsed, all three of those colleges, because they had no students except for the war students. So anyway, I went there, and the Navy V-12 went out on October 21st, and we came in November 1st, 1945. So the war was still on then, I think. And so it was practically all veterans, and I was one of only a few 18-year-old kids. So I got a very good education, but it was not happy, a social event. I mean, the vets, all they wanted to do was get their diploma and get out, which is understandable, you know? And so I graduated from Wesleyan with history and echo. At one point, I wanted to be a doctor and took pre-med, but no matter how hard I worked, it just wasn't in my things. Then I went back home, went to Rutgers, got my teaching certificate, and they started a new program for the Boy Scouts called Exploring for 14 to 18. That was new in 1949. And I started a crew in my old Boy Scout troop, and we went on the Appalachian Trail, we went canoe swimming, big time stuff. And then by accident, I found out that they had paid positions in the Boy Scouts. So I thought, that sounds challenging and interesting and new, so I applied for it and was hired. So I worked for 10 years as a professional district scout executive in Suffolk County, which was then, had very little scouting. It was pine barrens, potato farms, and fishermen and so forth, but almost no scouting. And so I loved that job, did that job for 10 years. And then I went to Short Hills Maplewood. I went to a support group for adults, singles, and had my wife there. She had 2 daughters, 11 and 12. So we got married, and I acquired 2 stepdaughters. Bought a bargain house in Maplewood, which is a very wealthy community, for $15,000, fixer-upper. And I couldn't afford to keep my family on what the Boy Scouts were paying. Plus, I was working 80 hours a week by choice. And so I took a job as sales manager for World Book Encyclopedia. And I did that for 10 years, and then I switched over to selling textbooks. Came back to Connecticut selling textbooks, which I did for 23 years, and loved the job. So anyway, when I came back, when I moved to Madison, they found out I'd been in scouting, and they asked me to come back into scouting as a volunteer, which I did, and I was district commissioner for the district here up to Branford and East Haven. And then one day, then another thing that I need to tell is that while I was I had different jobs selling textbooks, and one of them I covered all of New England, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, selling phonics workbooks, and spent quite a few time in Boston because they used my phonics workbooks. And while I was in Boston, I started to visit gay bars and gay baths. And that really threw me. I mean, it fascinated me, obviously. But I went to a gay bookstore and found out a directory to all the bars. And one was a leather bar, and one was a 3-piece suit bar. And so, and I'm not much of a drinker or party guy anyway. So I went to all these different bars just to, but they weren't interested in a 50-year-old guy. Most of them were, in their 20s or something like that. I didn't expect them to be. And the baths, they also had baths. So that was a rather traumatic experience that I was doing that. and I thought that I was having a nervous breakdown, really. And because I felt that I was violating my marriage vows and violating, my church vows and everything else. And I just really didn't know. And then anyway, I found out somebody gave me the name of an Episcopal priest in Hartford who specialized in counseling gay married men and women. I called him up, I went to see him, told him my whole story, and when I finished, he said, well, you're not the first person at age 50 to discover that you were gay. You might as well accept it and enjoy it. I looked at him as though he was crazy. This guy is crazy. But inwardly, I felt he's probably telling me the truth, whether I liked it or not. And so that was in an apostle. I mean, I value my church values, my Boy Scout values, and all the rest. And not telling my wife was just traumatic. And I didn't know what to do, but I was chairman of the high school parents committee. I was running for the Board of Education. I was a lay leader in the church, on and on and on. And my God, if they ever found out I was a homosexual, the whole world would collapse. And so for almost 10 years, I lived in the closet, and it was absolute hell. And finally, by age 60, I said, my parents and her parents lived into their 90s. It's worth living, and we weren't fighting or anything, but it's worth living in a loveless marriage. And I said, I finally figured that it was not worth living. Well, it wasn't fair to her or me. So at age 60, I came out to her. And bless her, she really took it wonderfully. She really did. She wasn't happy, but we stayed friends, and she remarried again 5 years later for the third time, and that was a happy marriage, and I was very happy for her. And so then I started leading what as best I could a gay life at age 60, and so the Scouters in Madison had asked me to come back into Scouting as a volunteer, which I did. I was the commissioner for the East Shore District. And then one day, and it was around 1993, I think, the vice president of the council came to my house in Guilford and said, we have bad news for you. And they said, you're being expelled from the Boy Scouts of America. And I looked at them, I said, my God, I said, everything I'd ever done in Scouting, had been one of the district, the Scout executive, who was a tough guy to work for, said, you're the best district Scout executive I've ever had. And I went to the jamborees, to two national jamborees in '83, in fact '93, with the local council. So they asked me to come back. They did ask me to come back. And he said, you're being kicked out. I said, well, what have I done? He said, you haven't done anything. I said, well, why are you kicking me out? He says, do you really want to know? And I said, yes. And he said, because we have discovered that you are a homosexual. That's exactly how he said it. And he was living with his girlfriend in an unmarried state at a cabin in Deer Lake, which everybody knew, and so what, It's okay for him, but not for me to be a homosexual.
Oh, of course not.
And so I was pretty ticked off at that and furious. They made him a council executive in Walpole, Massachusetts. They did. They kicked me out. And they didn't tell me that the Boy Scouts had changed the policy from 1910 until 1977. The Boy Scouts had no policy at all about homosexuals. And the Girl Scouts, bless them, have no policy either, and they have very few problems. So I can count on one hand the number of Scout leaders that I had to kick out because we discovered they were gay. Or no, they actually were abusing children. They weren't just gay. They were abusing children. So anyway, I said, I'm going to fight you till the day I die. And my mother lived to be 99. And everybody laughed and said, you think one person's going to change the mighty Boy Scout? But I said, I don't care. So for years and years, along with 10 others who were heterosexual Scout leaders who also got kicked out and were not gay, they were heterosexual, we picketed national meetings and had signs and that and marched and tried for it. So anyway, eventually, working behind the scenes, I and a small group of 10 people had a major part in changing the policy. And it never hit the press, a lot of people don't know about it. Although somebody's writing a book about it right now. writing a book about it. So anyway, that's my story pretty much. And then, so anyway, in 2013, when they changed the policy, another important thing is that I found one of the scouters who was supporting me from Madison said we got a letter from South Carolina telling us that you were homosexual. And there was only one person it could be, my stepdaughter. So I called her and she wrote the letter. Telling the scout that I was homosexual, which was devastating. Because, you know, from the time she was 13 on, I gave her a warm, loving home. I paid for her college. We never even had a fight or anything. So that really, really hurt me very deeply. So anyway, and I called her on the phone, and she admitted. She wrote the letter to get me kicked out of the Boy Scout. And it hit the headlines, by the way, in the paper. So anyway, into 2013, they invited me back into scouting. And that has been I've been to 3 Eagle Courts of Honor in the last 2 Sundays and taking part in the procedure, and it's one of the most inspiring and wonderful things I do. And to see those Eagle Scouts, I mean, you want to see some terrific guys.
About to say.
And the Eagle Scouts who had already gotten there were cheering them on in the ceremony, and some of them were crying. It was so emotional. This last Sunday, we have it at the community center, and also some of them in the barn. And so anyway, but to end up, I'd say that I used to tell the kids in school, I said, when bad things happen to you, which they do, and I look at all the faces of the kids that we speak to, I said, sometimes God and circumstances can bring good things out of it, and the 4 worst things that happened to me turned out to be some of the best. Number 1, discovering I was gay. I can understand it and deal with people in a way that I could never before. I know what it's like. And that I think is a plus. And then also getting divorced. If I had stayed married, I wouldn't have done anything like that. And then for the Boy Scouts, if I hadn't been kicked out of the Boy Scouts, I think they would still have the policy. They do. So that was a good thing that I got kicked out, because it made me mad, and I decided I'm going to do something about it with that. And so then I say, when bad things happen to you, which they do, sometimes God and circumstances can help you, come out of that and become a better person. So anyway, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, David. Next speaker, Gabby. Some facts to follow.
I know. Oh my God. Dave's 95 years young. He's definitely gotten better with age. You know, it's kind of like fine wine. We get better with age, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that really is a hard act to follow. You should have put me before Dave, okay? Anyway, I'm going to try my best to, further things along. My name's Gabriella Spear, or Gabby as a lot of my friends call me. And it's interesting to hear the other 2 stories, because although there might be similarities, there's also, differences. I've been 39 for a while. So I grew up in a very different time, pre-internet, pre-everything, in the 60s and 70s. And, I did not know how I truly am. And I don't say that I'm a transgender woman. I say I'm a woman who's with a transgender background. Because people don't go up to you and say, hey, I'm a Catholic man, or I'm a Spanish woman, or I'm a black woman. I am a woman. That's my soul, that's how I feel, and that's how I live my life. As a person, I live authentically as the person I was always meant to be. But I didn't know it at the time. There was no understanding or anything like that. There was no internet, there was no way to understand things. But for me, at 10 years old, I needed to express gender, to dress female, and I didn't know why. And because it was a very difficult time, I had a really difficult family background. My parents lived through the war in Europe in World War II. They left in the late 50s, but I didn't even learn English till I went to school at 5 years old. So I was bullied in school, but not for that, just for being different, you know, dressing different, not being, we were immigrants. No, so though we were European immigrants, but we are still immigrants. So the way that they dealt with things was to be very controlling and overbearing. So when I had these feelings of needing to dress, you know, and having a Jewish background, went into the Jewish temple, and they had all kinds of clothes along with other things that they were trying to sell to raise money, you know, garage sales, rummage sales, and I went in and was wearing the clothes. I never did it at home, and I never came out because I never felt it was safe to be anything other than what my parents wanted me to be. You know, so as time went on, I mean, it never goes away. And as a teenager, I did that. You always buy some clothes or get some clothes and hide things. And then, you know, for me, not having anybody to talk to or even understanding anything, you know, you can't believe we are this way. They have also seen that a lot of times people who are transgender, especially, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and even recently, overcompensate, because we can't believe that how we feel and how we look is so different, you know, like that too. So I actually also say that it's a birth difference, probably a more different, you know, a bigger birth difference than most others. Like there are people who have ADHD, people who have dyslexia, you might have blood disorders, or you might have, you know, genes that are different, one arm shorter than the other, or, you know, so my mind was born one way and my body was born another, but I did not even understand that. So the only thing that I did was to express it by dressing female. But anytime anybody found out about that, there was complete abandonment. Relationships ended, friendships ended, you know, like that, even my first marriage. And then when I got married the second time in the late 80s, it came out after a while, and my wife's way of dealing with it was to be emotionally abusive. You can't be this way. She came from the background that you don't get divorced. You know, she was Catholic, and you know, actually being divorced before would have actually made it worse. And you know, her, you know, especially from family background, you just seeing the way her family was, her way of family was like being emotionally abusive, which I've learned was kind of a repetitive cycle of what I grew up in, you know, as well. So, but it sent me into a deep depression, and it was like an unspoken secret in the house. We had, around the time that she found out about it, we had a child, which, you know, so she didn't want to get divorced, but, you know, the therapist I was going to had actually, it was a kind of a form of conversion therapy that, well, you can't be this way to be married. I was already going because of family things, and it just really withdrew and sent me into a deep, you know, depression. I just really worked and, you know, existed, and it was kind of that white elephant in the room, that unspoken secret, you know, at times. And the internet for me was also a great godsend to learn that there were other people like me, that there were people that might express gender differently. I didn't know about drag queens. I didn't really understand or know about Stonewall. In that sense, I was, you know, very sheltered in that. Although I grew up in Queens, I didn't know about Christine Jorgensen or Renee Richards or any of those things. And for me, the only way I even found out about transgender people was in the back of the X-rated section of the video stores. The he-she magazines, the she-males, the forced feminization, transformation, and those were not very positive images, you know, for those. And it was also being abusive, that you can't be that way, and it's like, I'll never even be able to be myself. You know, so it was a very negative thing, you know, as well. But my son saw something in the, around 2008 or 2008, and took him to counseling, because I said it can't be swept under the rug, you know. And then I decided that I was going to go back. And then I also joined a group that allowed, you know, to help people to have parties where they can dress in private and express themselves. And then they'd rent a club for the night, and we just had a good time and be ourselves. And the more that I did that, they were doing it once a month, I realized that for me, I was not dressing. I was female. And I went through all the stages. There's things about being bi-gendered or two-spirit, and I struggled with that too because I wanted to keep my family. So I was trying to be myself outside the house and, androgynous in the house, and it really just, it was very hurtful. And, at one point, and then I started going through medical transition, which means going through hormone therapy. And because I felt like this is who I am and I need to live. When I realized who I really am, I said I need to be more authentic. But I know when we make changes in families, regardless of what it is, whether you want to go to the health club or play golf numerous times a week, change affects everybody around you. So I always tried to be considerate and caring. I needed to be me, but I also knew that it affected the people around me. So I wanted to, try to talk about it, try to work about it, try to be understanding, but nothing was really could work. And then there was a point where I had said, I can't be for you what you need, and you can't accept me for who I am, so we can't stay together. And it was the best thing I ever did, because not only am I able to be fully authentic, to be the best me that I can be, I also got out of a hurtful, selfish, emotionally abusive relationship. And I am a domestic violence survivor. Emotional abuse as a child, emotional and physical abuse, and then as an adult, emotional abuse. So for me, being what we would consider different was a godsend, because I've grown a lot as a person. And if you're not your authentic self, every one of us needs to be our authentic selves, regardless of what that is. Even if you're typical, you want people to support your dreams and your hopes and wishes. And I became the best authentic self that I could be. I medically transitioned, hormonally like any typical female, physically, as well. And I look at things through female eyes and female energy. And along the way too, I came out at work, which was, socially, was out first. Work is the hardest place to come out because it's the place you make your money. And if you can't support yourself, then, and it's a scary thing to do that, because if you come out gay at work, there's no physical change. But when you come out as transgender, and if you've been at your job for a while, and I was at my job for over 20 years, I was an engineer, a design engineer, and then I worked for Newsday for many years when the engineering field changed on Long Island. And, I always felt like you needed to be easy about it, because to make it easy for other people, because, men and women are, seen differently. I was socialized one way, and I had, learn to re-socialize another way, and, to also understand the differences with that, and, to know that the change that I was making, I want to make it comfortable for other people, because it is a difference for that. So by doing that, rolling the punches, and people say, everything as far coming out of work went really well. In fact, I even made more money, than afterwards, because people saw me as being brave. So if we look at diversity and gender differences and people who are authentic as being people who are brave, it can be really used as something really positive. And I, speak about it. I started my own company called OTB Services, Out of the Box Services. Be your authentic self, whatever that is. So I've had people come to me and talk to me. If you can be this and be open and out, I can deal with the things that I am. And they come and talk to me, and I also do counseling and help people a lot during the way. So for me, it's been an amazing, wonderful experience on my most difficult days. And I have them because the thing is that a lot of transgender people go through is many times families are not supportive. So we wind up trying to have families of choice. So we not only get it socially with society and the difficulties with accepting people for who they are, you get it sometimes at work, or you get it from your family. So we kind of have the time to get it from all sides, and that's what makes life difficult. But on my worst day, I'm thrilled and happy that I can be my true self. And I'm very thankful to be here and talk to you guys, because it's spreading support and understanding is really important. I'm sorry it's been hard a lot of times.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thanks, Gavin.
Just before before we open up to questions, I just wanted to make two things clear. We probably use some terms here that you might not understand, and I just want to clarify. Sexual orientation is you're either homosexual, or you're heterosexual, or you're bisexual, or you're pansexual. It's on a spectrum, so everybody is somewhere along that spectrum. That's sexual orientation. Whom am I attracted to? Who can I romantically fall in love with? Who can I see myself in relationship with? Gender identity is what we're talking about when we say transgender. So you're either male, or you're female, or you're somewhere in between. You could be non-binary, neither male nor female. But it's gender identity is something inside of you. It's how you identify. And some people today, we realize, are identifying as neither male nor female, and they're presenting in a non-binary way. So I just want to clarify, if you have been assigned male at birth and you still are a male, you're cisgender. That's the same gender. If you've been assigned male at birth, but you present as a female, you live your life, you identify as a female, you're transgender. With some of the new terms for transgender, the old terms used to be transvestite and transsexual. If you had made some surgical changes, you were transsexual. If you were just a performer, you were transvestite. And that also encompasses cross-dresser and drag queens. They aren't necessarily trans. They might be, they might not be. We don't know, because the trans identification, gender identity is something inside of you. So I just wanted to leave that, and if we have some questions, we have some time.
Yeah, well, it's just a little after 7, so you can share some of your stuff.
No, I want some
Is
questions.
the
Oh, okay.
Jim Collins Foundation still in effect?
Anybody know the Jim Collins? Did you, what is that? What was it?
For helping people transition.
Oh,
He was
I-
from New Haven, he was
yeah.
a clinical psychologist.
yeah, I don't know, didn't know that was the name of it, but I've heard of a group or an organization that if you're transitioning, they'll help you pay for some of the surgical
What's the
expenses.
group you heard of?
I don't recall the name, but
Because it wasn't, it was some different name. than
Yeah.
Oh,
Jackson.
it wasn't the Jim Collins Foundation?
No,
There's-
he was the one that founded it, but he
There's
had a
Harry-
different name.
There's Harry Benjamin, and Harry Benjamin was a psychologist in New York City,
Okay.
and he was in psychology, it's the Harry Benjamin scale, and the he founded the DSM, which is, at one point, being gay was considered,
mental disorder.
a mental disorder, and it wasn't until things changed. But sometimes certain things need to be classified a particular way in order to get medical coverage and have insurance companies pay for things. There's more of a beginning of a movement for transgender things to be, classified differently too. But it's, when you're your authentic self, and, if you took a look at my brain, I have a female brain. The white matter and all of that, and if they, studied it that way, and there's studies that show that. And to be able to make my mind and body match is a wonderful feeling. People who feel comfortable with how they were born and identify don't go through that. There are a lot of times people take things for granted, not that they're just not made aware. That was the beauty of the internet, that I was able to see. It was like, oh my God, there's other people like me. So that negative feeling of how I found out about things was over time, and therapy and counseling was able to, to be changed, to see, because you talk about representation in society, in the news, and the Vice President Kamala Harris talks about being a role model for people of color, so that they can see themselves and like that too. But I didn't have any positive role models to actually see. It was all very negative. Having good. I was lucky to have a really good therapist to help along the way. And there are things that also happen. There's a difference sometimes in difficulties people go through as people, and then their gender journey. And sometimes they can be mutually exclusive or similar. Like, I went through a lot of abuse as the person I was born that had nothing to do with my gender. And then I had the gender journey, which on top of that helped, I didn't feel good about myself. And I didn't really realize, looking back on it, how much that had an effect when you weren't true to yourself, and you might have internal anxiety, internal things. And if we're not true to ourselves, it affects us emotionally, but that also comes out physically. A lot of people's physical ailments are because they're emotionally not dealing with things. They might come out with drugs or alcohol. I've had people that have been on 3 medications, that friends that I know, that came out and either transitioned or came out gay, and all of a sudden their diabetes went away. Their blood pressure dropped. They didn't need their anxiety medications anymore. So even when we look at insurance companies helping with these things, it's a small price, but the overall well-being of a person so significantly improves. My body's processing my food better. I don't eat the same way that I did, and I don't feel I have a need to eat the same way because I feel better about things too. You know, so there's so many pluses with being authentic for whatever that is.
And I might add that one of the reasons I think each of us speak is for the next generation, for youth. Right now, the statistics are that for youth who are coming out as trans, 50% of them attempt suicide. And that compared to teenagers their same age, it's much lower. It's like 5%. So we really want to be able to pay attention to the youth growing up, be able to offer them gender-affirming medical care in consultation with their physician and their parent, because that's how they become their true selves.
And being allies. We all need allies. Gay marriage, like you said, and another thing, was passed because, you know, a larger group of people understood that, you know, that love is love. And listen, so society can advance. Men and women need to get together. That's how we make kids. That's not going to change. But there's many types of families, you know, that it can be. 2 women and 2 men can have families. There's ways to, you know, for that to happen too, or there can be adoptions. But, you know, these are the cards that we were dealt, and we're all trying to make the best of it and make some positive progress. Younger people need older people, but we need people too, to be able to mentor, to be close to be loved. And if there's difficulties in families, allyship is really important. And if somebody doesn't want to be out, they have a feeling that something is different, they can just be an ally. You don't have to out yourself to be an ally. You know,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I've long thought that transgendered people are perhaps the bravest souls that walk the face of the earth when you consider all the losses and the difficulties and the abuse, excuse me, and so many other critical factors that would just destroy most people, make them want to kill themselves. And as a gay man who is in touch with his feminine side, as a gay guy, to one degree or the other, spectrum of course, and I've talked to my other gay friends about this too, it was bad enough that we had to be gay and carry that cross and deal with all that family shit you had to go through. But then when we think, my gosh, thank God, by the grace of God, we're not trans. And I've often thought, how did that feel inside you?
That's true.
How did that feel? That I mean, I'm in touch with my feminine side. I love beautiful things. I have a great garden. Blah blah blah. Everybody knows what gay men like to do, and so, for the majority, most of us, right? But it's not what typical American men like. So therefore, it's womanly. Therefore, it's weak. It's wrong. And so I sometimes feel like I'm just a breath away from a trans person because of that feeling of being on the outside. And yet, when I think of what you guys go through to get to be your authentic selves, and so many of you don't make it because you just crumble or you just lump it or you get killed or something terrible happens. You guys are the brave souls and the representatives of what can happen. And when I think about kids nowadays who get hormones before they go into puberty, they have cool parents. They have parents that say, I love you and I don't care what you have to do to make yourself happy.
That's a gift.
Yep.
Just loving people for who they are.
But that's so rare, though. We didn't have that.
Right,
None of you guys seem to have that. I didn't have it. A lot of us didn't. I mean, no one jumped up and down when I said I was queer.
Right. And I am honestly thankful that I didn't come out younger and that I had life experience older, because I got bullied in school, but for different reasons. I mean, gay people get bullied in school all the time, and it's worse. And it's hard being typical and going to school and being made fun of if you talk a little differently, your skin's a little different. I have a girlfriend's daughter. She's, her mother's white Irish, her father's black, and she's in the middle, a little lighter skin. But she gets it. She'd gotten into high school for both sides, and then she also came out as gay, like after high school. But there's, you get ostracized for that, and there's less of a difference of being able to understand and deal with that. The thing is that people don't have to understand to be loving and supportive. People can get pronouns wrong. As long as you know that it's not being done to be hurtful. Sometimes if people mispronoun people, it could, especially younger people, it could send them over the edge. It could, I knew that there's some people that were hurtful when they're doing that, and you could tell when it's just a mistake. Somebody knew me 30 years in a particular way. It's not going to change overnight. Just had a conversation with a parent whose child at 25 came out as trans and still says he sometimes, or a trans woman. So, and it's like, look, loving your child and embracing them is the best gift you can do. And it's a journey for parents and families too. It's not just the kids. This parent had an autistic child, and so they knew that person's never gonna have a family and have grandchildren. So the other parent was like, here I have a son, and if you'll get married, maybe have a child. And now that changed. So the parent, especially the mother, was like, oh my God, that's changed. But they could also still be grandparents in a different way. They just have, if the child wants, kids. So parents have their own struggles, and it's okay for them to do that. But just to be able to say, I love you no matter what. Help me understand. And if you make mistakes happen. It's part of life. And so how do we deal with it? How do we talk about it? Talk about it in a loving way. And it's like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand, or I don't understand.
Gabby, I'd like to give Audrey and Dave a chance to say what might be on their mind, unless we have another question from the audience.
Okay, you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, one thing that Stonewall Speakers that I'm so very proud about. Do most of you know what a GSA is? Okay, Gay Straight Alliance. That's what it means. And 25 years ago, we were trying to deal with the kids. Basically high school kids. But anyway, I sold school textbooks for 23 years. So I called on every one of 143 high schools. That was my job. And I would call on every department: health, science, math, English, foreign language, health, everything. That's what I did every day, day by day, visiting every high school. So I knew the department chairman in every single high school in the state. And so did the salesman for Ginn and Company and all the other companies. And we had an organization called the Connecticut Bookman. And we didn't compete, we were just supporting each other. But so you got to know, and they got to know you, and it didn't matter whether they bought any books from you or not. You call on them, you go to a high school, and you find out every department chairman has one period free. So you said, when was the science department program? When was the foreign language free? And you go and see them, that's how you spent your day. Do you need a new French book? Do you need a new Latin book? Do you need a new science book? I don't need any this year. Okay, here's my catalog, I'll see you next year. Yeah, that's what I did all day long. So anyway, you build up a really good relation, and they have a national state meeting for all the science teachers, for all the math teachers, for all the health teachers, and so forth. And the salesman go to them and pay $500 for a table to show your books. And I mentioned that for important reasons. So anyway, 25 years ago, we had one Gay Straight Alliance in Staples High School with Dan Logue in Westport. One in the whole state. And kids were killing themselves, drinking themselves, committing suicide, and doing terrible things. And they always said it's because of drugs or because they lost their girlfriend. But the special ed teachers told me, no, it wasn't because of that. He was gay, and he was captain of the football team, and if anybody on that team or anybody in the school found out he was one of those homos, his life was over. I mean, physically, every other way. I mean, that was the feeling. It may not be true, but that's what the kids did. And so many of them were committing suicide and all the rest. So anyway, we had one with the Gay Straight Alliance is a club, just like a chess club or a stamp club or a sports club, whatever it is. And you have to have a teacher advisor. So, and those make a tremendous difference in the school. The fact that there is a club, and they can go there and not be identified, and a lot of them would be girls who are straight. That's why it says GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. And I say, why are you joining the alliance? He said, I'm here to support my boyfriend, who's gay, and he doesn't dare come out because he's captain of the football team, or something like that. But anyway, we had one, but it can change a whole high school, okay, that one club. Because all the kids in the high school know that there is a club and that the kids in there are there for a reason, and that they shouldn't call them fag and queer and homo, and that's so gay, a common thing. So we had one. Okay, so because of Stonewall Speakers, and because of my contact, I was able to get into almost every single high school in the state, 140 high schools, and say, after I retired, I would call them up on the phone, and the first thing they'd say is, Dave, how are you doing? I mean, that's great that you have that kind of relationship. And I'd say, well, I have a new project, and we want to come and speak to your health class, and every 9th grader has to take health. And so they'd say, what about? Sometimes there was dead silence at the end of the phone. I said, what about? And then I tell them, but because of our relationship, and they knew I was a father and a family man and church leader and all the rest, we were able to get in to speak to every single 9th grader, and that changed the whole school. And all the other kids in the school knew that we were there because they said, Mr. Peters' class is having homosexuals speaking today. Wow, wow. And then we would walk down during the break in the gym for lunch, and the kids pointed to us and said, those are those people. Yeah, those are those people. And in Newington, the health teacher called me up the next day and said, the kids said, you look so normal. I'm serious. You look so normal. Well, in 85 or 86, there were gay people in their church, gay people in the town, in their sports teams and everywhere, but nobody would ever say that they were, or announce that they were. So they didn't know, all they knew about gay people were the cartoons. So anyway, but because of Stonewall Speakers, with no cost to the schools, with all volunteers, we changed almost every one of 140 high schools. Almost every single one of them has a Gay Straight Alliance now, and we had a part in that. We True Colors and other organizations too. But anyway, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
No other state in the country that I know of has done that. No other state. Why don't they do it? I go to national meetings and say, how do you get into the school? I said, well, I'll tell you something. If my kid, I had 3 kids, went through 3 different school systems, and I said, if my kid were being bullied, and I know kids who were being bullied to the point where they couldn't even go to school anymore. I said, and I wanted to come and speak to the kids about it. Boy, if I were to be the superintendent's office and the Board of Education raising holy hell, if I couldn't do something about what they were doing to my kid in that school, and all you have to do is get one school, and the principal calls the other principal. I say, well, do you know the principal next door? And I say to the health teacher, do you know the health teacher in Southington, from Newington? Sure. We would call her up and tell her whether the roof fell in or whether they had any riots while we were there. No way. But we made a hell of a difference in the whole atmosphere and attitude in the school.
Thank you,
It
Dave.
saved kids' lives.
Yeah.
Audrey, you have the floor.
Oh, goodness. Does anyone have any questions? I'm not much on the chatting about theory.
I do, Audrey. So you say that you're presenting as female and you're in organizations. Are you in where are you female and where are you not?
Oh, there's a clear dividing line. On the railroad, almost always, I'm in male mode. In the arts organizations, I'm always female.
And you dress accordingly.
And I dress accordingly, and everyone knows, about the other. Most people don't even ask. Actually, at the railroad, we have an art gallery, and the art gallery is run by Audrey, and I arrange for the shows and hang the shows, and I'm always there at the openings. And I've told a number of people at work, you want to meet Audrey? Come to the art opening. She'll be there.
Now,
Huge.
Audrey, have you had relationships or are you single? I don't know. If you mind coming.
Many years ago, a lifetime ago, I was married for a while, but found that was not working, and so I got divorced. And since then, I've had a number of what I refer to as
Put her on the spot.
I have practiced serial monogamy,
Serial monogamy, yes.
and mostly with men.
Yeah, okay.
And I have a boyfriend, and so it's been quite a while since I've had any relations with a woman other than social relations, but
When you're with your boyfriend, Audrey, are you Audrey, or do you?
he's never met.
He's never met the other.
No, he hasn't. And actually, I had a boyfriend a few years ago who was a policeman, and he wanted to, and I just said no. I said, you met Audrey. I said, I like you being Audrey, but I'm not at all interested in you in boy mode.
What the hell is that all about?
So it's his choice. It wasn't your choice, though, in that case.
Totally his choice. And truthfully, I don't know. I can suppose that he was curious, but I'm enough of an object of curiosity without going out of my way to satisfy someone's possibly putrient curiosity.
Well, we have people who, I facilitate a youth group, kids 12 to 18, and they go through a kind of a gender non-conforming, or they even call themselves gender non-binary or gender fluid, and they're more in the middle. And it seems like, Audrey, you're male and female.
It's true.
Well, in the old days, a woman who expressed more male energy, that was a tomboy.
Yeah, boys.
I mean, I had a girlfriend who, wore sneakers and jeans and, casual shirt, worked on cars with her father in the, 70s. And at night, I only knew her older, put on a dress and heels and went dancing. So that's a modern woman, work on a car in the morning and bake a pie in the evening, I mean, there was an AutoZone commercial about that. I said, you don't talk about dress. So, terms before, look at it now, people have multiple types of energy. A woman cop is not going to go up to somebody they arrest and say, please put that down. Nobody's going to listen to that. You have that very assertive, strong voice. And that would be called more male energy, authoritative energy, to be able to do that. So, we are all made up of multiple things. In my particular case, while I am a strong, independent woman and see things through female eyes, I am feminine and have that kind of feeling and energy. But I put on sneakers and jeans. I still work on cars. I'm like Melissa Tornay and my cousin Vinny. It's like I didn't forget about everything about cars that I know, but I love to wear dresses a lot. And
She's terrible driving in the car with, because anything goes on my dashboard. What is that? What is that?
Well, I like to learn. I just understand. I'm never a passenger. No, what do you mean? I didn't ask you to change it. I just was trying. I've never really been for a long time in a hybrid. She has a hybrid, and it was like, oh wow.
Right.
I don't know. But Audrey, I did want to ask you something. When was that article in the Current written?
That was July 6th, 1999.
99. So that's really in the early parts of the internet. I mean, the internet really didn't come out more use till the early 2000s.
That was the Hartford Current. It was an actual newspaper.
No, right. No, so what I mean is that even understanding things, the time that you were outed, it was still a very different time.
Oh, this is true.
You know, too. So that was, and the fact that your company was worked out whatever they needed to for things to be okay, you know, says a lot about the kind of people that were there at that time. You know, to be able to, you know.
Well, I was doing
And you were
a
a
good
good
job, and
Right,
they didn't care about my private life.
right.
And I will say that one of my bosses once suggested that I transition, and I thought about it for a while, and I just could not see Audrey getting her hands dirty because I'm just too fussy, and so I never did that. But it was a possibility.
Yeah, I work on cars with gloves.
By
I
the
had
way,
I lived with a woman for a fair length of time who would not, let me rephrase that, who hated wearing women's clothing. She dressed in boys' clothes all the time, and when, for her job, she had to put on a dress or put on a skirt, it was a traumatic experience. She hated it. She hated it. And so that was her life, was dressing as a boy.
Did she transition? Did she eventually trans? Sorry about ladies.
The final thought I want to leave us with, since
I wanted to say.
oh, you have a final thought.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I've had a boyfriend for 20 years, and we've gone to 20 different countries and sailed my boat every year, and but we haven't lived together, and I'm still looking for a husband.
Oh, is that
Never is late to be happy.
He's too negative. He's too negative, and I cannot live with negative people. But when we're traveling and sailing, he's also a great sailor. He's my first mate on my boat. So we sailed to Block Island and Port Jefferson and all over. But he's had a terrible upbringing and he's been gay all his life. But he had a terrible upbringing and a terrible experience at Yale University, which he went under duress because all his grandparents and great-grandparents went to Yale. He told them he didn't want to go to Yale, and they accepted him anyway, and he told them he didn't want to go there. Anyway.
See, that's the thing about being your authentic self. And he was a typical person. Well, no, he came out gay, but
Well,
he
at that
needed to be
time,
supported
no.
for his, but he needed to be supported for him not wanting to go to Yale, wanting to have a different
Right.
school choice.
And he found out he was gay when he was in the army after the war in Paris, and then he went into Paris and had relations with females, but then in his base there was some guy at the general's home when the general was away that invited some of the select men there to have sex there. So then he learned, so then he had to decide which way am I going to go.
All right. On that note,
Take it away, Lynn. Jump in, Lynn.
I think we can hang around to answer more questions or tell stories, but I wanted to thank Hageman Memorial Library and Emily for inviting us. And one thing to remember, you've met one trans person, you've met one trans person, you've met one trans person, you met one trans person, you met one crossdresser, you met one crossdresser, one gay. Everybody has a unique story. We're glad to share our stories, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And you know, if anybody wants to have a good understanding too of